You're listening to Press This, a WordPress community podcast on WMR. Each week, we spotlight members of the WordPress community. I'm your host, Doc Pop. I support the WordPress community through my role at WP Engine and my contributions on torquemag.io. You can subscribe to Press This on Red Circle, iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcasting app. You can also download episodes directly from WMR.fm. Today, we're diving into the critical world of website security with a spotlight on SSL certificates. An SSL cert is like a virtual shield that encrypts data and protects your users' data. Now, if that's not enough to keep you listening, imagine pouring your heart and soul into making a beautiful website only to have Google slap a big not secure label on your site when visitors try accessing it through Chrome, simply because you aren't using HTTPS or SSL. Here to talk to me today is Rogier Lankhorst, the lead developer of Really Simple Plugins, the makers of the extremely popular WordPress plugin Really Simple SSL. Rogier, thank you so much for joining us today. I'd love to hear about your origin story and how you got into WordPress.
Well, thanks for having me in the show. Originally, in I think 2016, a customer asked me to get his website onto SSL as quickly as possible. So I installed a plugin that was popular at that time, and the whole site went down. So at that moment, I thought I can do this more lightweight and easier, just one-click install. And I published it on WordPress, and it really was a roller coaster after that.
Absolutely. And this was not your first WordPress plugin, right? This was the first one that really took off in such a massive way, but you had some other really simple plugins before that?
Well, some really small experiments, really. Mm-hmm. Things I thought of at the time and published them, and they didn't really take off, as you said. So Really Simple SSL was the first big hit, you could say.
I always like that analogy. It's about buying lots of lottery tickets. Like you put out a lot of experiments and one of them caught on and you've been able to build a business from it. And since we're talking about SSL, can you tell the listeners, what is an SSL certificate and why is it important for a WordPress site to have one?
Well, with an SSL certificate, the website encrypts all data before it's sent to the website visitor, and the other way around as well. So it helps secure the web, and not only for web shops, but also for any website that otherwise could be impersonated by attackers. And it's also great for ranking in Google, and it just looks a lot better in your browser if there's a lock on your website. SSL is free, so why not install it?
I mentioned at the beginning of the show how the first time I ever thought about SSL was when I was using Chrome and came across a site that was not secure, and that site was mine. And so I was scared by my own site and had to learn about installing SSL certificates in order to hopefully have a better experience when users come to my site and see it. Once you install SSL and you have an HTTPS address, then Google won't show that warning anymore on Chrome visits. But does it also affect SEO?
Yeah, sure. Google has a lot of powerful tools to get users to do what they want. And the most powerful tool they have is the ranking. So if they want website owners to do something, they just put it in the ranking mechanism and the website will follow.
And you mentioned that SSL certificates are free these days. I believe when I first signed up for them, that was just beginning to happen. It seemed like it was a painful process and maybe cost some money. And then services like Let's Encrypt came around and really made it easier. On top of that, a lot of web hosts, mine included, started offering free Let's Encrypt. They started building it into the process to make it as simple as possible, which is really helpful. So with these alternatives out there now for being able to install, maybe from my host, is there a reason that someone would still be using Really Simple SSL instead of like if their host offers it?
Well, Really Simple SSL was not originally built to generate an SSL certificate. That's just something we added 2 years ago because I thought, well, if we are a really simple SSL, we should be able to generate a certificate as well. But it's not the main reason that people install really simple SSL. When users have SSL, they often don't know what to do with it. And in WordPress, you need to do a few things: add a redirect, fix mixed content, and stuff like that, add security headers to really get all out of the secure SSL you can get out of it. So I think that's still the main reason people install really simple SSLs. Just the quickest method to get SSL configured on your website.
Yeah, and there are some added security features that aren't, I don't think of them necessarily as SSL related, that are part of Really Simple SSL. Can you tell us about some of the other advanced features that a Really Simple SSL includes?
We noticed a lot of people already thought of us as a security plugin. So that's when I thought we have to fulfill that expectations. We started with adding some hardening features like blocking user registration. A lot of websites owners are not aware that user registration is open. And things like the debug log location, which can contain important information like user email addresses or license keys or stuff like that. File editing feedback on the login screen. And like if you log in and WordPress says, the username not correct, the attacker knows I can try again. So all those things are really the start for us to broaden into a full security plugin eventually. And the last feature we added was the vulnerability detection, which is really a great tool to really secure your website, as most issues in WordPress websites with security are caused by plugins with a vulnerability which are not updated. So if users are more aware of that, I think WordPress will become a lot more secure.
Mm-hmm. Everything you mentioned, I think, are like little pet peeves that people have about WordPress security. And it is really interesting that Really Simple SSL has kind of evolved into this easy way to install an SSL certificate, but also like these things should be patched. Here's really easy ways to fix that. I'm kind of curious if bloat is a concern of yours when you have a plugin that's like called Really Simple SSL. Are you worried sometimes that by adding these extra features, you might be making it a little more difficult? And then I guess on top of that, are you also thinking about changing the name of the plugin as you add more features?
Yeah, well, eventually that is the goal, that it will become Really Simple Security. I think that will be the beginning of next year. But while talking about bloat, that's a difficult thing. You want to keep things as simple as possible. So we have worked hard to make it still possible to just do the SSL activation, and all other things are modular and not loaded when you don't use it. But at the same time, I think we're really good at making complex really simple. I think that's where our power is, what we can really do for people to make it really simple for non-technical users. And for more advanced users, they can dive a bit more into the settings.
That's wonderful. I think that's a good spot for us to take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to keep talking to Rogier about Google's push for SSL. And I guess just we're going to talk a little bit more about what it's like having one of the most popular plugins in the WordPress repository. So stay tuned for that.
Time to plug into a commercial break. Stay tuned for more Press This in just a moment.
Welcome back to Press This, a WordPress community podcast. I'm your host, Doc Pop. Today I'm talking to Rogier Lankhorst, the lead developer at Really Simple Plugins. And we are talking about SSL because Really Simple Plugins makes an extremely popular plugin called Really Simple SSL. Rogier, before this break, I mentioned that a large reason that we're talking about SSL certificates these days is largely because Google made a push on the web for this to happen. I'm also seeing that Google is pushing for maybe shortening the term. So some SSL certificates are for like 2 years, and Google's talking about pushing for 90-day SSL certificates. Did you have any thoughts about how Google encouraged people to get SSLs? Do you think that worked out great for everyone?
Well, I think it's a good thing because a lot of users, at the time that Google started with this, a lot of users still thought SSL isn't important for me because I have just a small blog. I don't have any user data on my site. But there are a lot of other ways attackers can use that kind of connection between websites and maybe show wrong information to users, pretend to be there with another website. So I think it's very important that all websites will have an SSL connection eventually. So I think although Google always has its own reasons for doing things like this, in this case, it's a good thing.
And the 90-day limits, did you have thoughts on that?
Well, I'm not very familiar with the reasons behind it, I have to admit, but I know a bit about it and that it's more secure to have shorter lifetimes of certificates. And I think it won't make that much difference because the most used SSL certificates from Let's Encrypt already 90 days. So it wouldn't have much impact anyway.
So let's go back to talking about Really Simple SSL. There's a version on the WordPress repository, the plugin repository, the free version with 5 million. I know I keep saying that, but it's such a shocking number, 5 million active users or more. What is the difference between the free version of Really Simple SSL and the pro version that I know that you'll offer?
Well, the pro version mainly contains a lot of security headers. And I think most users are not really familiar with security headers. But these are some very important headers users can set on their websites, which will also increase security. And not only for their own website, but also for the website visitors, which I think is often forgotten in security. We make it really easy to configure security headers. And we are currently working on, for example, for the vulnerability detection, we have a feature which automatically handles the update or quarantine if a vulnerability is detected. We also have a cool new feature coming up, which will prevent creation of admin users by any other method than the WordPress user profile update or creation. So if you look at recent vulnerabilities, you will see a lot of them. The problem is that admin users are created. So if you lock that, you prevent a lot of vulnerabilities.
We had talked about the ranking of this plugin in the WordPress repository. I'm on the popular page on wordpress.org/plugins right now. And I don't know if these are ranked in terms of order, but these are all like plugins with 5 million active installs or higher. I see that just on this list, Really Simple SSL is the 9th down. I think that might actually be meaning that it's the 9th most popular plugin at the moment in terms of active installs. Yeah?
Absolutely.
Wow. That's incredible. And so, a lot of these other, it's not a big surprise to see Yoast and WooCommerce and Akismet here. I'm wondering, I don't get to talk to people who created such popular plugins. I don't get a chance to talk to them too often. I'm just kind of curious while you're here, what is that like? I mean, I guess here's my first question is, when you have such a crazy popular free plugin, I imagine it makes it really difficult you probably get a lot of requests, a lot of comments, a lot of questions and help requests. How do you handle that for a free plugin?
I think it's not as much support requests as people often think. Mm-hmm. During the development of the plugin and the past 7-8 years, I've always tried to either create an article on the website when there was a question or create a solution in the plugin itself or make it more clear in the plugin. So that approach has really kept support down. And we are now with a company of 10 and with just 2 support reps, We also have 2 other plugins. I think in total over 6.5 million installs. So I think the support load is not as big as many people think, looking at the numbers of the installs.
Can you talk about like the business model of a free plugin like this? How does a company like yours enable 5 million active installs on Really Simple SSL and still be a company?
Well, there's, of course, for every free user, there's every 100 free users, there's someone who buys the premium plugin. That's where we can build a company on, from the upgrades. And I also always say there's sometimes free users complain about the upgrades. And we want to tell users what we offer. And they always say, well, I think it's a great deal because the premium plugin allows us to develop for free for 5 million users. So I think everybody wins with this deal.
Yeah. And in terms of balancing what goes in the free and what goes in the pro versions, I'm just curious if you have thoughts on how you sometimes determine what, how things get charged or how things stay free to, help promote the larger product. Is it tough to decide when new features get added, for instance, if they're pro only or if they're free?
Yeah, there's always difficult discussion to think about what should be in the free and what should be in the premium. And we usually give away a lot, I think. And our main approach is that, like with the vulnerabilities, the detection is free and everybody can see if the vulnerable plugin. But for automatic solutions to that, you can get a premium plugin. So that's a bit how it's divided. And well, with the last update, the coming updates, I think we will add more in the premium plugin, like login protection, 2-factor authentication, and limit login attempts, stuff like that. That's also because we think there's already so much in the free plugin that we want to keep the balance right. We want to start with putting more in premium right now.
And I think that's a good spot for us to take our free episode of the podcast into commercial break, which helps keep it free. That's a nice segue. Stay tuned for after this short break. We are going to come back and wrap up our conversation with Roger from Really Simple Plugins about some of the other plugins that Really Simple are offering right now. So stay tuned for more.
Time to plug into a commercial break. Stay tuned for more Press This in just a moment.
Welcome back to Press This, a WordPress community podcast. I'm your host, Doc Pop. Today I'm talking to Rogier Lankhorst, the lead developer of Really Simple Plugins. We've been talking about SSL certificates and Really Simple SSL. We also talked about the fact that, Roger, you have several other plugins out there. What are some of the other plugins that you're currently focusing on at Really Simple Plugins?
Well, we also have Compliancy, which is privacy solution, and it's the fastest growing plugin apart from Really Simple SSL, and it offers a cookie banner and also blocks services that require consent according to local privacy laws like the GDPR in Europe, and in the United States also more and more privacy regulations. Canada is becoming an opt-in privacy law as well. So a lot of things are changing in the privacy legislation. Mm-hmm. So the plugin offers a way to handle that automatically. And we also have a statistics plugin, which is pretty new. It recently hit 100,000 installs. And the goal there is to provide a privacy-friendly statistics solution. So you don't have to use Google Analytics, which requires consent in most countries. You lose data there.
It's really interesting you're talking about this because I have been thinking a lot lately about Google and the web's relationship with Google. And I'm thinking like, I don't really need to have Google Analytics on my site anymore. Like, I don't need to have people opting out of the cookies if the only thing really there is Google Analytics. So I'm like, you're talking about burst statistics and you're talking about it being a alternative to that. I'm like, I'm all ears. I'm definitely interested in that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool because I think most users only know Google Analytics and they don't know there are more solutions. And most users are also not aware of the privacy issues that Google Analytics raises, especially in more strict privacy legislations.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today and talking about the work that y'all are doing and about SSL in general. That's been very interesting chatting with you. If people want to find out more about what you're working on, what's a good way to keep track of really simple plugins and maybe what you're working on?
Well, I think maybe follow me on Twitter, Lankhorst, or sign up for our newsletter on reallysimplessl.com. We'll be sending newsletters on our latest news every few weeks.
Well, that's great. I really appreciate having you on the show. Thanks to everyone for listening to Press This, a WordPress community podcast from WMR. We've had a lot of great episodes lately, and soon we will be going to WordCamp US, which hopefully will come back from there with a lot more interesting stories and interviews with folks, so stay tuned for that. You can follow our adventures on Twitter at @TheTorqueMag. That's at @TheTorqueMag. Or you can go to torquemag.io to find versions of these shows with transcriptions, as well as our social hour live streams and all sorts of tutorials. So you can find that on torquemag.io. You can subscribe to Press This on Red Circle, iTunes, Spotify, or you can download it directly from WMR.fm. Again, I'm your host, Dr. Popular. I support the WordPress community through my role at WP Engine, and I love spotlighting members of the community each week on Press This.
The opinions expressed on this program are those of the guests and hosts and do not necessarily reflect those of WebmasterRadio.fm's management or sponsors. Any rebroadcast or redistribution without authorized consent of WebmasterRadio.fm is prohibited.